Welcome back. As a quick recap, Raon boldly requested a sword duel between him and Raon with the Patriarch, who, with a sly smirk, agreed to the match, calling it a small bit of entertainment. The Patriarch then gave the green light for the duel and announced the time. If you're new or need a refresher, consider checking out the previous part before we dive into this new chapter. Now that we're all caught up, let's get started. In the tranquil surroundings of the true martial palace, Balder, Raon's father, sit with a contemplative expression. His eyes seem to bore into the distance, as if lost in thought. "I see," Balder says, his voice low and measured. "So, there will be a sword duel in the end." Raon, standing before his father, flashes a confident smile. "That's right, father," he replies, his voice laced with determination. Raon launches into a detailed explanation of the events that transpired, his voice filled with a mix of emotions. He arrogantly requested a sword duel in front of grandfather, Raon says, his tone laced with disdain. Balder's expression remains stoic, his eyes narrowing slightly as he listens intently to Raon's words. Raon continues, his voice steady. "The conditions we set state that if I win, we'll break his energy center." A hint of a smile plays on Raon's lips, his confidence evident. Raon's expression turns serious once more, his voice taking on a note of determination. "And if I lose, my butler and I will apologize to the Annex Building's people. On top of that, the true martial palace won't approach the Annex Building anymore." Balder Sieghart, the master of the true martial palace, lets out a hearty laugh, his eyes gleaming with amusement, his voice is filled with confidence and a hint of arrogance as he speaks. No matter how talented he is just a son born between Sylvia and some unknown person, Balder says, his tone dripping with disdain. "Show him the reason why you are from the direct line." Balder's gaze lingers on Raon, his eyes burning with expectation. He is clearly eager to see Raon prove himself, to demonstrate the superiority of the direct line. Raon's face radiates confidence, his voice filled with conviction as he responds to his father's words. "Don't worry about it, father," he exclaims, his tone dripping with assurance. "I didn't have any weapons back then, and I was taken by surprise," Raon acknowledges, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, "but he is no match against me since I've reached the intermediate realm of expect." Raon's chest puffs out slightly, his shoulders squaring as he stands tall, exuding an aura of self-assurance. Balder's face creases with a wide, approving grin as he lets out a hearty laugh. "Ha ha ha. That's my son for you," he exclaims, his eyes shining with pride. His expression turns serious, and he offers Raon a word of caution, "Just in case, though, make sure not to get too excited and end up killing him." Balder's voice takes on a calculating tone, his gaze piercing. "It'll look bad if you kill him in a sword duel." Balder's grin returns, his eyes glinting with a ruthless light. "So, just cut the tendon on his wrist, make him crippled to completely destroy his hope." Raon's face sets in a firm, determined expression, his eyes burning with conviction. He nods sharply, his voice filled with confidence. "Yes, understood, father," Raon replies, his tone resolute. The air seems to vibrate with Raon's determination, his words echoing with a sense of unyielding resolve. Meanwhile, outside the Annex Building, Sylvia and Helen, the loyal maid, stand concealed behind a window, their faces etched with worry as they gaze at Raon. They had been watching him train, their eyes fixed on his determined form. Helen's voice trembles slightly as she speaks, her eyes fixed on Sylvia with a mix of concern and uncertainty. "Young master is going to have a sword duel against Sir Raon. Is it really fine to stay here and do nothing?" Helen's voice is laced with worry, her tone trembling slightly as she continued. "Sir Raon is an intermediate expect, but our young master has only managed to reach the novice level." She pauses, her eyes pleading with Sylvia. "Perhaps it's not too late to stop him." Sylvia's expression remains calm, but a hint of concern flickers in her eyes. She gazes out the window, her mind racing with thoughts of the impending duel. Like Helen, she can't shake off the feeling that this sword duel is too dangerous. Sylvia's thoughts turn inward, her mind replaying the events that led to this moment. She thinks to herself, like Helen said, this sword duel is too dangerous. Raon wouldn't have ended up in that kind of situation with Raon if he hadn't panicked. Despite his imposing appearance, Balder is a master of the flexible sword, a style that is both intricate and unpredictable. His technique is full of variety, with each strike carefully crafted to target the enemy's opening. It's a subtle yet deadly approach that has earned him a reputation as a formidable swordsman. As Raden's mentor, Balder has imparted his knowledge and skills to his son, and as a result, Raden's fighting style is a reflection of his father's expertise. When he steps onto the battlefield, Raden transforms into an entirely different person, one who is focused, calculating, and ruthlessly efficient. Sylvia's thoughts drift back to Raon, her mind recalling the determined look in his eyes. However, Raon's gaze back then. She thinks to herself, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Sylvia remembers the fire in Raon's eyes, the unwavering resolve that seemed to burn within him. Sylvia's expression transforms, her eyes shining with a newfound confidence. She turns to Helen, her voice firm and resolute. "Let's have faith in him," she says, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Helen's eyes widen in alarm, her voice trembling with worry. "Pardon? Are you really going to let this happen?" she exclaims, her tone incredulous. Helen's gaze darts back and forth, as if searching for reassurance that Sylvia hasn't lost her mind. Sylvia's expression softens, her eyes gentle with understanding. "I'm actually nervous and worried about him too," she admits, her voice tinged with empathy. "But there must be a reason why Raon confidently asked us to believe in him." Sylvia's gaze drifts off, her thoughts introspective. "That's why, for now, let's just believe in Raon." Helen's face remains etched with concern, but she nods slowly, seeming to grasp Sylvia's perspective. Judiel, the double agent, emerges from the shadows, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Young master, I've brought lunch," she calls out, her voice carrying across the training grounds. Raon stops his training, his sword hovering in mid-air as he turns around, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Judiel," he says, a hint of surprise and wariness creeping into his voice. Judiel replies, "Yes, I've brought some sandwiches to make it easy to eat. Since you've been using your body thus far, please eat slowly to avoid upsetting your stomach." She hands Raon a neatly wrapped package containing the sandwiches. Raon takes the package, his eyes meeting Judiel's for a brief moment. "Understood, thank you," he says, his voice sincere as he nods in appreciation. As Raon opens the food pack, his eyes widen in surprise, and for a brief moment, he becomes speechless. His gaze is fixed on the contents of the pack, his expression frozen in a mixture of shock. Raon's eyes scan the book in his hand, his expression incredulous. "This is..." He pauses, his voice laced with confusion and a hint of annoyance. As Raon flips through the pages of the book, his eyes widen in surprise. He can't believe his luck. The book contains detailed information about the flexible sword technique that Raden practices. Raon's mind racing with excitement, he thinks to himself. Ion's eyes scan the pages, impressed by the clarity and organization of the information. His thoughts continue, "Moreover, it's nicely put together to make it easy to read at a glance. Did she really manage to gather all this information in a single day and compile it into a book?" Raon's mind is filled with a mix of amazement and curiosity, wondering how Judiel had managed to accomplish such a feat in such a short amount of time. As Raon looks at Judiel, his expression softens, and his thoughts turn introspective. "She even stepped up back then to protect my mother," he thinks to himself, recalling the past event. A sense of gratitude and appreciation washes over him as he continues to think, "Now she even brought me the information about Raden without being asked." As Raon gazes at Judiel's tranquil expression, a sense of sincerity fills his heart. He whispers a silent thank you, his thoughts conveying his genuine appreciation. "Thank you, Judiel," he wishes to himself, the words echoing in his mind as a heartfelt expression of gratitude. As the days turned into weeks, Raon's determination only grew stronger. He trained tirelessly, honing his skills and perfecting his technique. Every spare moment was devoted to preparing for the impending duel, his focus solely on emerging victorious. In stark contrast, Raden's confidence in his own abilities led him to become complacent. He slacked off in his training, relying on his natural talent and past successes to carry him through. His days were filled with leisurely pursuits, his mind distant from the looming duel. As the two parties spent their time in their own distinct ways, the air was electric with anticipation as the day of the sword duel finally arrived. The entire household was abuzz with excitement, everyone's attention focused on the impending clash between Raon and Raden. Servants and guards alike whispered among themselves, speculating about the outcome and placing silent bets. Raden's eyes gleamed with a malevolent intensity as he thought to himself, "I've been waiting for this day. You don't realize how much I've been looking forward to cutting you down after that day." His mind replayed the memory of their previous encounter, and his anger and resentment simmered just below the surface. With a self-assured smirk, Raden grasped the hilt of his sword, feeling its familiar weight and balance in his hand. Raden's eyes blazed with a fierce intensity as he thought to himself, "I'll crush your body, and make you unable to wield a sword ever again." His mind was consumed by a desire for dominance and a need to prove his superiority over Raon. He sneered inwardly, convinced that his opponent was no match for his skill and strength. Meanwhile, Raon's movements were deliberate and measured as he slowly grasped the hilt of his sword. His eyes never left Raden's face, his gaze steady and unwavering. The referee's voice echoed through the arena, "Combatants, come forth when you are ready." With a confident smirk, Raden strode into the center of the arena, his sword held at the ready. Raon followed, his movements calm and deliberate, his eyes fixed intently on his opponent. As they faced each other, Raden's voice dripped with arrogance, "I'm looking forward to seeing your face after the sword duel." He seemed to relish the idea of Raon's defeat, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent intensity. Raon's response was measured and calm, his tone devoid of emotion. "I'm curious if you will ever manage to see that," he replied, his words laced with a subtle hint of challenge. The referee's voice boomed through the arena, "Well then, start the sword duel." As soon as the words left his lips, the air was filled with the thunderous sound of drum, echoing off the stone walls of the arena. The beat was primal and intense, seeming to match the racing hearts of the two combatants. With a fierce battle cry, Raden charged towards Raon, his sword held high and his eyes blazing with confidence. As he closed in, he sneered at Raon, his voice dripping with mockery. "Your bluffs aren't going to work anymore," he taunted, his words meant to unsettle and intimidate. Raden's sword thrust forward with precision and power, aimed directly at Raon's chest. But as he looked forward, expecting to see the impact of his attack, his eyes widened in confusion. Raon had vanished from his sight. Raden's mind reeled as he stumbled forward, his sword slicing through empty air. He quickly regained his balance, his eyes scanning the surrounding area frantically. But Raon was nowhere to be seen. "Ha! He disappeared," Raden thought to himself, his confidence wavering for a moment. Raden's thoughts were still reeling from Raon's sudden disappearance when he felt a presence behind him. Before he could react, a cold, metallic sensation pressed against the back of his neck. Raden's eyes widened as he realized that Raon had somehow managed to move behind him undetected. Raden's mind was racing with shock and anger as he thought to himself, "This bastard. When did he get behind me?" He tried to process how Raon had managed to move so quickly and stealthily, but his thoughts were cut short. Raon's voice was calm and collected as he spoke up, "This is the first time." His words were enigmatic, but they seemed to carry a deeper meaning, as if he was referencing something more than just the current situation. Raon's words were laced with a cold, calculated intensity, "You're going to die 8 times today." His eyes seemed to bore into Raden's very soul, as if daring him to try and escape his fate. With a swift and deadly motion, Raon raised his fist and punched towards Raden's face with full force. The impact was tremendous, and Raden's head snapped back as he stumbled backwards, his body crashing to the ground. Raden's scream of pain echoed through the arena, "Gah!" Raden's mind reeled as he struggled to process the sudden and devastating attack. He was still trying to catch his breath, his head spinning from the force of the blow. As he stumbled backwards, he couldn't help but think to himself, "What just happened? I couldn't see his movements at all." Raden's eyes locked onto Raon's, his gaze searching for answers. He spat out another mouthful of blood, his voice shaking with anger and confusion. "What did you even do?" he demanded, his words barely above a whisper. Raon's expression remained calm and collected, his eyes gleaming with a hint of amusement. "Stand up already," he said, his voice firm and commanding. "What are you waiting for?" Raden's eyes blazed with determination as he stood tall, his sword at the ready. But before he could launch a counterattack, Raon continued to speak, his voice dripping with venom. "I told you, you're going to die 8 times today," Raon repeated, his eyes glinting with a cold intensity. "One for the price of your lie about sending a letter." Raden's face twisted in a fierce snarl as he unleashed a determinate battle cry. "You arrogant bastard," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the walls of the arena. "I'll make you regret that you didn't finish me off with that blow." With a fierce war cry, Raden and Raon charged forward, their swords at the ready. The air was electric with tension as they clashed in a flurry of steel and movement. But in an instant, Raon vanished, leaving Raden stumbling forward, his sword slicing through empty air. Raden's eyes widened in shock, his mouth hanging open in stunned silence. He stood there, frozen in place, his chest heaving with exertion. Raden's face contorted in worry, his eyes scanning the surrounding area frantically. He thought to himself. He disappeared again. I thought I cut him down for sure this time though. His mind was racing with confusion and frustration, unable to comprehend how Raon could vanish into thin air once more. Suddenly, Raon felt a presence behind him, and before he could react, Raon's voice whispered in his ear, "I'm on your left." Raon's eyes widened in alarm as he tried to turn around, but it was too late. With a swift and deadly motion, Raon punched Raon's face with the hilt of his sword, the impact sending Raon stumbling forward. Raon's voice was low and menacing as he spoke up, his words dripping with venom. "This is the price for spitting on the flower raised by my mother." His eyes seemed to bore into Raon's soul, filled with a deep-seated anger and hurt. Raon, still kneeling on the ground, clutched his face in agony, his eyes screwed shut in pain. Raon's fist connected with Raon's face once more, the impact sending Raon's head snapping back. "This is for trampling on my mother's flower," Raon declared, his voice cold and detached. Raon's eyes were glazed over, his face a mess of blood and bruises. But Raon wasn't finished yet. With another swift punch, Raon's head jerked back again. "And this is for hitting Helen," Raon spat, his anger and contempt evident in every word. Raon's body crumpled to the ground, his limbs splayed out at awkward angles. As Raon lay on the ground, receiving punch after punch from Raon, his mind reeled in shock and confusion. "This can't be right," he thought to himself. "This can't be right. This can't be happening." He couldn't understand why he was losing so badly, why Raon's attacks seemed so effortless and devastating. Raon's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with questions. "He's only using star-connecting sword and river footwork," he thought. Raon's thoughts flashed back to his own training, his own mastery of the ancient arts. "I am higher realm expert, a master of the subtle and intricate techniques that only a select few could hope to achieve," and yet, despite all his training and experience, he was losing to Raon, a novice expert who was supposedly inferior to him. Raon's eyes blazed with anger, his face twisted in a snarl, and his fist connected with Raon's face once more, the impact sending Raon's head snapping back. As Raon thought continued, "So why am I losing against him?" Helen's voice trembled with amazement as she spoke up, "Young master." She and Sylvia watched in amazement as Raon struggled to defend himself against Raon's relentless attacks. Helen's eyes remained fixed on the duel, her mind racing with thoughts and concerns. As she watched Raon's deliberate and calculated movements, she couldn't help but think to herself, young Master Raon could have finished the match with that first strike. Yet he's going out of his way to give his opponent a chance and drive him into a corner. She furrowed her brow, her gaze intense as she analyzed Raon's actions. He isn't simply doing this for victory. Helen's hands scraped against the wall as she continued to think, her mind racing with the implications. "Which means," she thought, her eyes widening in realization, "he is taking revenge for the violent conduct against us." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she looked at Raon, her gaze filled with a mix of sadness and understanding. She knew that Raon's actions were not just about winning a duel, but about seeking justice for the wrongs that had been done to them. Helen's thoughts swirled with a mix of emotions as she gazed at Raon, her eyes brimming with tears. "Even though we are worthless maids," she thought, her voice barely above a whisper in her mind, "even though we aren't even treated as human beings in this household where lineage dictates power." She felt a lump form in her throat as she continued to think, her heart overflowing with gratitude and admiration for Raon. "He is fighting someone from the direct line for our sake," she thought, her mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of Raon's actions, and destroying him on top. Sylvia's eyes were wide with amazement as she watched Raon duel, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke up to herself, "Raon." She couldn't believe what she was seeing. As Sylvia watched the duel, her mind began to wander back to her past, memories long buried rising to the surface. "As my father only sought for power," she thought, her eyes clouding over with a mix of sadness and nostalgia, and the house gradually felt colder as time passed. She felt a pang in her chest as she recalled the emptiness and isolation she had felt growing up in the household. Despite being from the direct line, she had always felt out of place, like an outsider looking in. Sylvia's thoughts were tinged with regret as she reflected on her past. "In the end, I couldn't stand it anymore, ran away from the house, and looked away from reality." But as she gazed at Raon, Sylvia realized that she had made a mistake. "But I shouldn't have done that," she thought, a sense of resolve forming within her. Sylvia's eyes shone with a newfound sense of purpose as she watched Raon. "I should have relied on my strength to overcome the unreasonable situations of this cruel land," she thought, her voice barely above a whisper. "That is what he is showing us right now. As if to emphasize her thoughts, Raon unleashed a powerful slash, his brute strength propelling the attack forward with unyielding ferocity. The force of the blow was so great that it sent Radon's sword flying from his hand, the blade spinning through the air before clattering to the ground. Sylvia's eyes burned with a newfound sense of determination as she watched Raon. No matter how weak we are, we need to have a strong will, she thought, her voice echoing in her mind. And fight until the last moment, no matter who we are up against, so that they won't cross the line anymore. She felt a surge of admiration for Raon, who was showing her that the only way to truly protect oneself was to stand up and fight. He is showing us that we need to advance, instead of running away, she thought, her heart pounding with excitement. With a fierce battle cry, Raon tightened his fist and punched Radon squarely in the face. Raon's blow knocked Radon to the ground, rendering him unconscious. The referee's voice rang out, loud and clear, Raon Sieghart is incapacitated. The sword duel's outcome has been decided. His words dripping with drama and anticipation, the winner of this sword duel is... He paused, the silence hanging in the air like a challenge. And then, in a burst of triumph, he declared, Raon Sieghart. What a thrilling conclusion to this chapter. A huge thank you to everyone watching for joining us on this epic adventure. If you're eager to find out what happens next, be sure to comment below asking for more chapters. Don't forget to show your love by liking and subscribing. Until next time, stay tuned.